Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hi, it's Jackie Cation, and you are listening to The Dork Forest. The website's JackieCation.com, DorkForest.com, TheDorkForest.com if you like a determiner. Let's do the credits. Patrick Brady's going to fix this audio and video. Vilmos works on JackieCation.com, and Mike Ruekberg sang the song with his wife, Sarah. He composed it, and he will sing his version of the Mexican hat dance at the end of this show. Thank you so much for listening to The Dork Forest. Here's a scoop. I'm doing stand-up online. A lot of Zoom shows will eventually go back on the road. Sign up for my email list. It's easy to get off. It's harder to get on than it is to get off. And no harm, no foul. If ever bored, JackieCation.com, sign up for the email list. You'll find out about my weekly Zoom shows and stand up on the road eventually. You may donate to the show if you would like. I would like. Sure, I would. There's PayPal, Jackie at JackieCation.com, and there is a PayPal button on both DorkForest.com and JackieCation.com. And there's Venmo, if you like Venmo, Jackie-Cation, oddly enough. If you have listened to all of the shows, go to dorkforest.bandcamp.com, I think. The Dork Forest has a Bandcamp page. You can listen to a lot of ones that are free from pre-2009 when I started pre-recording. And then there's live episodes that cost me a couple of bucks, so I charge you a couple of bucks. There's also some stand-up. There's a story album that's very exciting there. And other than that, I have a lot of merch in my garage. Feel free to order if you know anybody who doesn't have any CDs or the DVD. And you can follow me everywhere at Jackie Cation. Let's get into the show. Hey, it's Jackie Cation. I am right now in my garage as you seem to be in your sister's apartment or home. Jeanne, Hospod, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Now, tell people where they can find you. Like, you got an ant? I know you're a painter and an animator, and you have a really cool animation special that you did with David Huntsberger.
Yes.
Horse Dork. He was on this program talking about how much he loves to smell right behind the nose of a horse.
Oh, I have to catch that one. I missed that one. I love David. He's a great guy. My art site is I have two of them. I have a blog. It's jeannehospod.blogspot.com, and then my art site is just the website. No blogging kind of stuff is at jeannehospod.com, and
which is probably everything's linkable, right?
Yes, yes.
From that main website, do you have like all of your socials kind of?
I have Twitter. I think my Twitter is separate. I think maybe it's connected via my blog. And I just started Instagram not too long ago, but I haven't really done a whole lot with that. I've just been keeping it semi-private. I may start a specifically art Instagram site.
Fair enough. And it's spelled Geanne, right, Jeanne?
Yeah, Jeanne. Hospod,
Did I say
Hospod.
J. It's a J.
J.
I said G like a crazy person.
Really? Oh,
so
okay.
it's a J. It's a Jeanne. Hospod,
Yes.
Hospod. It'll be in the notes, you guys, just so you know.
Okay.
And you said you wanted to talk about Scott Walker, and I had a small triggering moment because that was the name of Wisconsin's governor for some time, and he was a maroon or a bad guy, not a good guy. So, but that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about some musician.
No, I'm talking about the musician. Actually, his real name is Noel Scott Engel, but he went by the stage name of Scott Walker.
Okay.
And he passed away in 2019, unfortunately. But he had a 60-year career in entertainment, kind of progressing into art. And
interesting.
Yes, and he
died in 2019.
Yes.
How old was he when he died? Do you remember?
He was I believe he had just turned 76.
Okay, so not a career cut tragically short, but not
no.
yeah. So an older gentleman. But
Yes.
where was he from?
He was an American, but then he moved to England, and spent the rest of his life there. Once he was in the swinging 60s, when the big British invasion came over. Scott, who used to kind of go against things, go against the tide, went across from California to England with his band, the Walker Brothers, to start his career there, and he lived there for the rest of his life.
Oh wow! So he lived in England or Great Britain or whatever from the 60s.
Yes.
And what kind of music did he do?
Okay, that's probably take up the whole show here. He started off as a child actor and entertainer, and he was doing when he was a little kid. He was in he did with his family. He had moved around, and he started off doing child. Doing like a little small town singing contest, and he would win them. Like he would live in Texas for a while. Sure. He started off in Ohio. He had moved around. His father was worked for an oil company. Started off, went to Texas, performed locally, and then his parents broke up. He moved back to the East Coast. Do you hear that?
Do I hear a noise? I do not.
Okay, it was just.
You will at some point hear helicopters because I live in Van Nuys. Okay. And sadly, there's a lot of people learning how to fly helicopters in my hometown, in what is currently my hometown, which is where my home is, which is Van Nuys.
I'm getting I'm sorry, it's a little technical thing. Let me just unplug something and plug it back in. I'm sorry. Okay.
Well, it's an exciting time to talk to Jeanne Hospod.
I'm so sorry.
And we're going to be talking about Scott Walker. And if you go to JeanneHospod.com, JeanneHospod.com, you can check out her art and stuff like that. And I think she'll be back any minute now.
I'm sorry. It was a USB thing. If it happened, hopefully it won't happen again.
I can't hear any of it.
Okay, that's good. It's just this little notice. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so
you're great. You just tell me. I mean, I've never heard of him. Does he do folk music? Does he do rock music? Does he?
It was rock. He started.
Probably not a rapper. No, he's a rock. He's a rock. Is he a musician?
He is a musician. He had as a child actor went off did Broadway. Then he went to the West Coast with his mother after his parents divorced. He was a protege of Eddie Fisher. He did a lot of pop tunes in the 50s, very kind of a teeny bopper. Went on to become a session musician in LA. Then he got it together with the Walker Brothers, and he renamed himself Scott Walker. And
does he have a brother?
It's not his brother. It was John Mouse, not the John Mouse who there's a electronic artist named John Mouse who ended up going kind of full horseshoe following Trump at the January 6th. Not that John Mouse.
Full horseshoe is the greatest statement I've ever heard in my life. Go ahead. I love it.
So this John Mouse, he changed his name to the Walker brother. He changed himself to John Walker and Scott. They did a brother act because that was the popular thing at the time in the early 60s. Okay. Then they were doing just pop music, swinging 60s pop.
Did he play guitar or piano? What did he play?
He played bass guitar. But he went from trying to sum it up. He went from pop to kind of a harder rock into. He would not like to say avant-garde. If you're going to use shortcuts, I would say avant-garde. He never wanted to be out beyond. He was really a brilliant guy, and he kind of his intellect and his references would kind of go way out there, but his goal was never to be so beyond that you can't connect to it. It can be challenging, but he really went out kind of, I'd say, like in the realm of like a Laurie Anderson.
Okay. So he wanted to be accessible, but he's writing pop and rock in the 50s and 60s, but then does it go to like acid rock or heavy metal, or does it just go more folk and more acoustic?
It went from I'd say like the kind of 60s ballad pop.
Okay.
And then he was repressed by his record company after he was going further and further out at doing more personal work, and he finally embraced. He finally just kind of went his own way, and the record company said, "This is
we don't like that way.
We don't like that way because it had failed." I guess I should get more specific here.
I like the big picture, and then we can totally get specific. It's your world. Go for it.
Okay, that's fine. He did this piece. He did this. He broke away from the Walker Brothers. He was doing more personal work and really going in his own. It was pop, but it was just really beautiful, unique, personal pop. And he did this album that was called Scott Ford because he had other albums before it, that was really his own masterpiece of writing. And it was gorgeous, and it was a complete commercial failure. It's now considered a masterpiece.
And it was called Scott Four, F-O-U-R. Okay.
Yes, Scott Four. And from there, his record company, they said, well, no more of that. You're gonna do covers.
Covers?
I mean, he was doing covers before occasionally, but he would mix them up.
Right.
And he would mix them up, and then he started doing Jacques Brel covers, which was a very kind of this musician, a Belgian musician who dealt with the seedier side of things and death and sex and the kind of the gritty underbelly.
Ooh.
And he got access to his to his catalog for the first English translations, and he started doing them himself. And he was like this like rock god, and he presented them. It was, well, I want to say rock. He just had this presence. It's just. He really just did these beautiful interpretations of them with this confidence and this kind of this blonde all-American rock, was a rock star, but he was trying to go beyond it. And it influenced his own writing till he did this album, Scott Ford, which was all his own stuff. And it was very personal, it was very beautiful, and it did not do well. Did not do well, but it's now considered a masterpiece. His record company says, "Okay, we're going to get you off of this. You're going to start doing more covers."
They didn't like the covers of the Belgium guy.
It was a little too artistic, too arty.
They wanted him to do more Beatles covers, maybe.
Yeah, standards. Yeah. They tried to make him a bridge. Like people compared him at the time to like an Andy Williams, Frank Sinatra. There's like a Frank Sinatra for the younger set. He was a very pretty man, and definitely had the sex appeal for both the teenagers and the housewives.
Sure.
And it's funny when they say, when they make references to that, like as if that's to put it down, because if it appeals to the girls or to the women, it's not as artistically valid, which which is ridiculous.
Right, because they were trying to go for the 18 to 34-year-old men.
Yeah,
and then. Well, forgetting that it turns out the 14 to 35-year-old women also have access to some cash.
Yeah.
And what year is this when Scott Ford came out? Do you remember?
1969, and it came out 1 week before my birthday. So
nice.
yeah.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. So I was so he spent like the next almost not quite a decade. It's about the next 7 or so years. Even though he said he would never compromise, he now had a daughter. I remember him saying one time that a manager had advised him to get a large apartment, and I'm wondering if it was kind of to trap him, to get him comfortable. Even though he always said he'll never make a compromise, and he got him right at a vulnerable spot. And he was resigned to do these covers. He tried to start making them his own. He was starting to kind of go into a country mode, interpreting country music. And he had as someone said, he had a serious flirtation with country. And even when he reformed the Walker Brothers, they went country. And
like Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, like 70s country?
70s country, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And 70s country folk and things like that. And
was it pretty good, or?
I liked it. I thought it was good. I mean, it's not art with a capital A, but it's lovely. And he did like the kind of stuff he was doing. Like, if I not that I would use this as a caliber of like what's great, but like if like these like these singing contests you see on reality TV,
right?
They would give their eye teeth to be able to be at the level he was doing at that stuff. But he didn't want to do that anymore. He wanted to keep writing his music, but he just was so discouraged. And he had started developing a little bit of a drinking problem. And then he just went really into the drink after this, because he was just like, he showed up, he did the recordings, he followed, he did it, he fulfilled his contracts, but he was just like, but his heart wasn't into it. And he really was starting to have a drinking problem. Then this is the thing, there was this pivotal moment where his record company said, I think it was Phillips. I'm trying to I have all these notes. So I don't. Right. I don't. They said to him, "Well, we're going." His record company said, "We're going out of business," and so instead of having X amount of albums, because he actually had reformed the Walker Brothers just to make some money,
right? And
they said, "Well, instead of fulfilling your contract, you owe us one more album, and it doesn't matter anymore. Do whatever you want." And he said, "Seriously, anything I want. Yeah, do whatever you want." And he got together the Walker Brothers and said, "Okay, guys, this may be our last chance to ever record again. This might be the end for us anyway. Be as self-indulgent as you want. I'm going to be self-indulgent." And
good for him.
Yeah, and they all kind of just did their own things, and they wrote their own songs. I mean, Scott would help produce them, and they did this album called Night Flights. Okay. And the first 4 songs were Scott's, and they went from, and this is the thing that just blew me away. Before he did, even when he was writing his own music, it was these beautiful watercolor washes of autobiographical observations and emotions and stuff like that. And it was sentimental, but it was absolutely stunning. And there's nothing wrong with sentimental. Although he had said later on in retrospect, he felt like he had it was something he was struggling with, because I guess he felt like he wanted to go beyond like a sentimental or things that have to deal with self-pity, and he wanted to kind of pull focus a bit.
Has he ever heard any Harry Chapin? Are you kidding me? Harry Chapin. I had a Harry Chapin album once, and the first song on it was about how a baby dies of hunger in the third world. And you're like, could you stomp on somebody's heart more actively? Like it was so contrived. I remember, and I was 19. So of course I had soaked it up. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so he couldn't have been worse than that.
Yeah. Oh, but when he goes into, he talks a lot about social issues, but he doesn't ever he would say he doesn't like folk singers who tell like, this is how you should feel. And this is like really real literal,
so it was more socio-political than political.
He would like to tell a story, and he would tell a story, but in this really mysterious kind of poetic way. And just hit you with the emotions without, without being cloying.
Or the details, right? So not the details of a specific sort of event. It was more a larger, do you see what's happening in the world kind of thing? Or
sometimes, but it was like not in a just in, but also very how to say, like looking at it with a kind of a coldness and letting you into it without manipulating you.
Right. It was just sort of more objective.
Yes.
Okay.
And so he did this 4 songs though from Night Flights, and they start off as they're first of all, they're rock. They are rock, and there's a Bowie connection. I was going to go into the Bowie bit.
Please.
Maybe I should go back and go to hitch it right back, take a wave back to the Night Flights. So what got me into Scott was, I still remember it, January 10th, 2016. I wake up, I look at my phone, and David Bowie died. And it just the beginning of just a lovely year. And I just had this kind of this sinking feeling in my gut. I had not been a manic follower of Bowie, but I always had a great affection for him. And I started going into a rabbit hole, going into his back catalog. And every time I would look him up, I kept seeing this picture of this guy in shades in the 60s, kind of like a 60s dandy that it just would always show up. And that was Scott Walker. And what apparently it was for this show, for this movie documentary that David Bowie had executive produced called 30th Century Man, and which was directed by Stephen Kijak. And this is what kind of led me into him.
So you were sort of just struck by the photo of him behind Bowie, and you're like, who the hell is that?
Just kept, his picture just kept showing up whenever I would look up Bowie.
Because he hung out with him a lot. Do you think he worked on some of his albums or anything?
I think he might have actually met him in person once, but he was someone who was extremely pivotal to Bowie.
Okay.
Yeah. So to go back, and I'm going to hit you back to Night Flights, but going backwards. So Bowie, when he was starting off in his career, before he was Ziggy Stardust, Thin White Duke, and all that, way back, he was when he was just developing himself. He had started dating this slightly older musician named Leslie Duncan, and Leslie, she is one of the singers on Dark Side of the Moon, on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, the Great Gig in the Sky, that kind of orgasmic, those women singing in chorus. And she also wrote she wrote a song for Elton John. And so she had stage fright, so she never really fully pushed herself. And she kind of retired and got married and was a gardener later on. But before she met Bowie, she co-written a song or two with Scott Walker, and they were lovers for a period of time. And they broke up. I don't know if they broke up or they just sort of drifted, but they were on good terms, and she had a great affection for his music. And this is, I think, after several albums of Scott's solo work post Walker Brothers, and she would play this stuff all the time. And she's dating this guy who's a little younger than her, David Bowie, and she would just play Scott's music all the time and said, "You need to up your game. You're good, but you really listen to this guy."
Right.
And he would also the Jacques Brel covers that were just he would just the command he had, the incredible baritone Scott had, the passion he had in his voice, in his singing, and then his own songwriting quality. And she says, like, you need to really up your game. This
Right,
is
right.
what it's at. And it pissed Bowie off. He's just like, romantically,
Sure.
and he's also, competitive. And he's like, what the hell is this guy? And then he realized, God damn it, he's really good.
Right.
He's really, really good. And he just fell in love with his music. And he said he became his idol. And
Wow.
so he would look to him. And so when Scott was kind of working up towards this beautiful early peak of Scott 4, and Bowie was just getting himself together musically, then Scott was suppressed by the record company,
Right.
and said, now do covers. And they're kind of aging, they're putting him in sort of a very much of a period of like,
Right.
yeah. And while David his star is ascending.
Yep.
And so when we get back to Night Flights now.
What year is Night Flights? Do you remember?
Night Flights is 1978.
Okay.
Now, Scott, he always kept up with what was going on, even if he was being forced into certain areas. And he was impressed with Bowie's Berlin work. There was, especially he had some orchestrated, trying to remember the name of it. I don't know if it was Low. It might have been Low. I know he had 3 albums from Berlin. That was one of the things I didn't put the notes on.
No worries.
But in any case, Scott liked his work. He liked what he was doing. And he was a little inspired by that. And then he did the Night Flights. So one song's about alien invasion, one song about a dystopia, one song about like kind of this night flying predator of a sorts. And then another song of this layering of 2 meanings. One is like it's called the Electrician. One is like a BDSM encounter between lovers. You can look at it like that. Or it's also about a CIA operative in Argentina torturing a prisoner. And with electricity, because that's the way they hook them up. So you can listen to this song in one way. It's like a very sexy, dangerous song. Another one, it's absolutely horrifying. And he brought his full beauty of this orchestrated music. He used all the prettiness they used of the past, and poured it into this one song as a totally twisted, messed up, because it shows like there's this interlude of this Spanish guitar and these swelling strings similar to what he would do during his previous time when he got to work with big orchestras. But this is all about this swelling and stuff. It could be the just the passion between 2 lovers, which is all sweet and lovely and nice, or it could be basically the internal bliss of a sociopathic CIA operative, like just the internal bliss of someone and that's kind of gives a hint of where Scott goes, where when you see someone like this, it's just horrifying, because you realize there's no reaching them. There's this inhumanity.
Right. So he depicts it in both ways, which is that's very complicated. That's very layered, and the way it fits together and the nuance there, that's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And this album also flopped, but Scott didn't care anymore. He knew this might be his last chance, and he wanted to go out doing what he wanted to do.
Right.
But I don't know if you've ever heard this about the Velvet Underground. Like they said they said something like only 20 people bought the album, or something to that effect. Like very small amount of people bought the album in its time, but everyone who bought it made their own made their own band, and that's how they influenced it. Well, this album, the first 4 songs on Night Flights, I don't listen to it. Like I have it on my phone. I have it downloaded on my phone. I don't have any of the other Walker Brothers stuff on it. I mean, they were okay. They're fine. It's just not on his level.
Right.
So the first 4 songs I have of them, and they influenced, it sounded like underground goth rock of the 80s, where it was still 1978, and it influenced Ultravox. There's a bunch of other it's just a lot of goth, just a kind of a lot of
just goth rock, though.
Goth rock, yes. A lot of goth rock, electronic rock. And even though it was not electronic, he played on big organs in a church to get this big sound. But people can't, if you're starting off and you're a teenager and you're listening to this, you can't do that. So you try to approximate it on a synthesizer.
Right.
But it definitely, if you hear them, they just have this they're kind of soaring and swooping and sexy and unsentimental and ferocious and dangerous, where before he was they were just like kind of these watercolor washes of impressions. And
that's neat. Wow. Yeah. It's so cool to watch sort of the growth of an artist like that, but in music.
Yes.
To see the new stuff that they write versus and when you stop caring, right?
Yeah.
When you know that you're always gonna either make a living or have a day job or do other things for money, but then do the art for the art.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so it got him through other, well, first of all, so Brian Eno got a hold of this album and David was still in Berlin, and he's like, David, you got to listen to this. And David listened and he's like, so because he had this affection for his work because it influenced his early period.
Right.
And now here, and it sounds like Scott was just kind of going towards, he's just kind of drifting away into the past. Is your parents' music. Nelson, he puts this on and he's like, oh my God. And he's like, God damn it. He says, he did in 4 songs what I've been trying to do for the past several years.
Right.
And in 4 songs. And he was obsessed with it. He later on in the 90s, Bowie covered Night Flights, the song. It's such a sexy disco, new wave disco, post-punk. It's gorgeous.
Okay.
And then later also the Electrician, the ominous sound of that and the whole vibe, he imagined it as doing an album as a sequel to it called Outside. And he did that in the late 90s, in the 90s.
Okay.
And he had heard that Scott was going to be doing he was going to be putting an album out, and he was nervous because he was thinking, oh shit, because I just tried to do a sequel to Night Flights, but it was a totally different animal. Well, I'll get back to that. So after Night Flights, there was a long period of silence. He had the opportunities through the goodwill of other musicians who loved this music, kind of talking to record companies, and he got signed again.
Right.
It was a really horrible contract, and fortunately he was able to, I think they released him from it because he did this album in 1984. After the period of time between Night Flights and Climate, I think he was struggling. I'm not sure exactly what was happening. He was not making music, but he was living his life.
Right.
He was, there was talk later on about, I'm not sure if he was homeless or he may have been on the verge of it, but he was trying to do other things. He was doing house painting, possibly driving a cab, possibly doing interior decorating. And so he had other means to I think he was just being an entertainment workhorse since he was a child. So I think he just needed a break in any case.
Right. So like in 1969, is he like 20 years old?
No, 69, he was born in 43, so he's about 26 years old.
Okay. So in 1984, if he's in his 40s.
He's just hitting his 40s, yes.
Yeah. And so he just has a couple of bad years, or a couple of years when he's not really, he's got other musicians who appreciate him and want to get him work and maybe are getting him work, but he's also picking up odd jobs for cash.
Yes,
Okay.
He is. And he's and he said at this point, he did not want to be just churning out stuff. He talks about trying to work. I've heard him say in two different things: working from a silence and working to a silence. So
what does that mean? That's awesome.
Well, I think that's what something that really touched me, because there's this idea, and when going to art school was like, you always work, you're as good as the last thing you do. You work, and I remember doing this performative productivity. And I mean, during school, you should take the most advantage of it. And you really should, as you're young and you've got the energy. But also remember, like, a teacher who, he had good stuff, but he was always like, you never stop. And he was, you just always producing. And I think sometimes, I mean, and the thing is that the galleries will take you more seriously to do that. But at the same time, I think sometimes you need to just turn it off for a little while and recharge.
Yeah.
I've had times where I've struggled. I have personal problems and other things, and I would, and I would stop for a moment, and then there's this thing like, well, if you're not doing it now, you're not serious, and like,
right,
you're not a real artist. And
right. That whole real business can fuck itself, quite honestly.
Yes.
Because it is, I mean, it's something. It's so interesting when they put that into the art world, when that sort of American exceptionalism, that sort of American Puritan work ethic tried to, and worked. It got a hold of the art community and said, you have to always be producing. Yes. And it doesn't allow a chance to refill the well, that Artist's Way book or whatever.
Yes.
It doesn't allow you to be able to create from a place of silence. That's such a cool thing, that to silence from silence.
Yes. And he was also, he read voluminously, and he was very inspired by film, European art movies. That's why that was part of the appeal of him going to England. And then he also spent some time in the Netherlands, not believe it, but he mostly in London, but but in any case, he wanted to, he really connected with the idea of Europe and art film, and that he could, and reading, and I think he wanted to be able to absorb from that more instead of just producing.
Right, because if he would have stayed here, if he would have stayed in the United States, that's when there was so much churning. There was so much churning out of all these things. I could see him in 1969 going, I have to slow down.
Yeah.
I have to go somewhere where the art is just going to, it's weirder things are happening.
Yeah, right. And then 69, he really did, he put his whole self into that album. And when I think he was a little bit heartbroken because of the reception, and the album company, the record companies telling him to go in other places. And he checked out for a while.
Right, because if you're certain that what you've produced is really, it's some of your best work, for it not to be recognized is something that can you really have to work to get over that sort of disappointment. I can see that. Yeah.
And then when he was older, I think he just was more confident in himself as a, like, I am not that he didn't have to churn it out. And I think he wanted to get something that was just he was more connected to and more depth. And also he had more life experience. And he was also very, very protective of his personal life. He wouldn't share much. And when he dealt with biographers, if they tried to get too into his personal stuff, he would just cut them off, because he didn't have time for that. Yeah. If it felt that, he would talk about things in terms of if it affected his process, but he would not talk about, his sex life.
What do we know? What do we know about what gossip do we have about his life? He was an only child?
He was an only child.
His parents were entertainers as well, or
no, his dad was in the oil industry.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
And And he had apparently it was a tumultuous relationship with his mother, and they had divorced pretty young. He said he remembered some really bad fights.
Okay.
And then his mother was sort of a stage mom, escorted him up to New York, where he became he was on Broadway.
And they got divorced when he was like 10 or 12 or something, like sort of
younger. I think he was probably like, my guess is probably about 6 or 7, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. So earlier. Yeah.
Yes.
And then when he went professional, what town was he living in? Where did they end up?
Well, his mom took him into New York, so they were doing New York, Broadway, and then they went out west to L.A., where he became an Eddie Fisher's protege on his TV show.
Oh,
I forgot to mention that. Yeah. So
no, you mentioned Eddie Fisher, and all I could think was I thought he was a comic.
Yeah,
but he had a variety show where he nurtured musicians. I forgot about that. Okay,
Scott was on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I forgot to mention. Also, when he was in New York as a kid, when he was like a young kid to a young teen, he was on a show called. Let me see. I think I got it on here. Oh, I'm blanking on. It's the Startime Kids, and he was Joe Pesci was one of his co-stars on there.
What?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, they went out west. Eddie Fisher kind of mentored him, and he was a guest several times on his show. But then Eddie Fisher got it. He was married to Debbie Reynolds, and then he was messing around with Elizabeth Taylor, and then just the moral outrage caused him to have to end his show. And then that was into Scott on the kid, on the upcoming kid, teeny bopper kid thing. And that's where he decided he was trying to balance school and doing session work and stuff like that. I think it got expelled from school one time or it got suspended because he was cherry bombing toilets and just little mischievous kid stuff.
Right. He was 14.
Yeah.
Whatever. What are you gonna, it's a certain kind of 14, but it is still 14. I got all kinds of slack to cut for the 14-year-olds of the world.
Yeah.
And then
Walker Brothers went out to London because he had one of the band members. I think they brought him on because his dad was a financier and he could pay for them to go out there.
Sure.
Went out there. They got their start there. And so Walker Brothers, they were very popular. They had the girls chasing them down, ripping their clothes off, turning their cars over, getting into his personal business. He got very stressed from that. He said it was great until it wasn't anymore. I think at first, the female attention probably felt wonderful, but he is a private person. And I think it got too much and it was very upsetting. And I think also being smarter and a little more sensitive, it really was getting to him. Apparently in the mid to late 60s, around 66, 67, there's talk that he had attempted suicide. I don't know if you have to, be careful about what goes into the show for that, but if that's a trigger.
It's well, hopefully not. It's the thing is suicide's real. It's don't do it. There you go. I'm going to take a stand, a crazy stand, Jeanne Hospod.
So he did attempt suicide. I think it was actually caught by the fans because he was trying to gas himself, and the fans were hanging out outside his apartment, caught scent of it.
So he had some depression. Yeah.
Yes. He decided to go to his official words with this was, I wanted to learn Gregorian chant, and he went to a monastery and just tried to lay low. Problem was his fans followed him there and made too much of a. He didn't let them in. They just were hanging out around the edges, crazed teenage girl.
Right. He probably I'm sure whenever John Lennon tried to go. He climbed a mountain in Tibet, and I'm sure somebody showed up going, "I love your work."
Yeah.
And stop talking to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he did that, and they had to tell him sorry, you'll have to go. But they gave him a key and said, "You're welcome back at another time when you'd like, someday in the future." And he wore that key for a while, and and then he was doing his solo work, and he also got himself a TV show, a variety show, and it only had 6 episodes, and it was just where you have guests on like Dusty Springfield, Jeanne Pitney, Blossom Dearie, who wrote a song about him, and called Long Daddy Green, and it's just about this kind of sexy, mysterious guy who kind of charms you and then disappears and then comes back again at your door.
Sure.
And I think she was older. She was older. I don't know if they had like a special relationship or just a flirtation or what. And so he had the show. He went through Scott 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then all the covers in the country with the Walker Brothers.
But he had a kid, right?
He did have a kid in the early 70s. Yeah, there was a woman from the Netherlands he a fan, and they got married, and they had a daughter. Okay, and he did divorce. They did get divorced later, but he now had to deal with raising being able to support a daughter. I don't know the specifics of that. Again, he kept that very locked down.
Sure.
So got the night flights. Now there's like this pause with he was doing some other things, not clear exactly where and when, but not some non-music work. As I said, the house painting, the interior design. Did this album called Climate of Hunter, where it's still pop and it's still rock, but it's beginning. The song structures are beginning to dissolve, and they're getting spacier. Kind of has this icy sensuality to it. It's very beautiful, and there's a song he caught on there called "Dealer," and it's really weird. Like, I don't know if you've heard a thing called binaural beats.
No, what is that?
It's like there's these. I don't know if it's woo woo or how much it's scientifically sound, but certain.
Fair enough. No worries.
Certain,
warning. Everybody knows now. Go for it. What's it called again?
But binaural beats.
Okay.
Certain and they also called isochronic tones, I believe, is the other thing. It's these certain frequencies that are supposed to stimulate different parts of your brain, and certain ones may help you concentrate. Some people will play them, whether it's music or just the tones to be able to study or to sleep or for sex or for whatever, And
there's a bunch of them.
Yes.
Okay.
I've never heard him mention these at all. However, when he did this song called Dealer, there's this tone, and sometimes he called these tones that he would put under his music. This is kind of like that would sort of bind his music. He called it the binding sound. Okay. And the binding sound on Dealer is so strange. I'm not someone who's used a lot of drugs, but I've had to take opiates as a painkiller from when I've had procedures, and things like that. And
as prescribed.
As prescribed, yeah. And it had kind of this floaty feeling. And it's strange that it felt, it really, this tone seems to mimic like an opiate high. And it's amazing. The song's about junkies, but it's also really ethereal and beautiful too. Mm-hmm. And it's just weird how he did that. And so these songs the song structures are beginning to come apart. Mm-hmm. And there's another pause. It's a beautiful album. I think it's another masterpiece. It's one of its own era, but it also, I think it was Virgin's worst selling album that year.
So this guy is an artist. It's 1984. Yes. He's put out his Climate album. Yes. And the world doesn't care. The critics love it. Yeah. Do you think?
Critics, yes. The critics were very positive about it.
Yeah.
And they were thinking, well, maybe something else coming, and then another silence. But right. I think he was kind of working I think he was kind of, at this point, the gears were going. he is continuing doing his other stuff, whatever it is. But one other thing, now he decided to go to enroll in art college and study painting and drawing.
Okay.
And he, from what I have never seen his artwork. I've looked. I don't know if it's
Can't
just
find
hidden or it's
Yeah.
under another name. If anyone can ever find it, please.
Jackie at JackieCation.com. Scott
Yeah.
Walker's art, if anyone knows where to get it. You know, there are a lot of listeners to this show who know how to work a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So there is hope.
I did hear the work did have this abstract braille, like it was like these dark kind of black abstract pieces that were that had a textural quality like braille.
Okay.
And I also know this, even though he was a house painter, he did interior decorating and he went to art school, he was colorblind.
Oh, weird.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So he worked in tones, and I think that's why he also liked a lot of older European art movies. I think he liked that kind of black and white. I think that like just kind of it's its own emotional color world in a weird way.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
It does.
So
I like it.
He's beginning to. So he's kind of thinking about getting back in there. I know he contacted David Sylvian of Japan to possibly do something, and David I think he was agreeable to it, and then nothing happened for a while. So then David just went on and did his own stuff. But then
Who's David Sylvian?
he's another he was a pop musician in this band called Japan in the 80s, and it was very pretty pop. And then he went on to continue doing his own art and music, and he's still working to this day. People usually put him in the same universe as a Scott Walker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And what year is this? Like early 90s?
late 80s, early 90s. And so that never happened, but they stayed on. I believe they were at least they were friendly. But Scott started just working on his stuff quietly, and he puts out, this is the second revolution. He put out this album in the mid 90s called Tilt. And Tilt is this combination of like classical and industrial rock. Nine Inch Nails is an influence at the same time. And also, this has this operatic quality to it. The first song on it is called Farmer in the City, and it's about the filmmaker Pasolini looking back at his life, and he was also about his murder, I believe, or his kid, the mystery of how he passed away. It might have been at the hands of his younger lover. Mm-hmm. It might have been some sort of hit.
Wow.
But then, so it's this open, it's like it's like this epic opera. And then you think, okay, this is going to be kind of a semi-classical album. Then the next song is called The Cockfighter. And all of a sudden, boom, it's this harsh, mechanical, industrial churning. And it's a overlapping two parts of history. One about, I think, a member of British royalty having an affair, and another one of a Nazi in the trial of a Nazi. With the murder.
The Nuremberg trials.
I don't know if it's in the Nuremberg trial. It might have been, but with a Nazi being held accountable to what he did with masses of his captives. Yes. Genocide.
But it was it was not operatic. It was more heavy metal, or was it more like noise music?
It's not. It's a little bit of noise, industrial noise. But this is the thing. It's like. It's really hard to categorize. Someone have put him into this category called leader music, where I think.
How do you spell that?
Lieder.
Okay.
I believe leader, and I think like you what he started to do is he would write lyrics till he got them just where he wanted them. And then he would build sound, whether it was sound effects, orchestrated, rock, or whatever he had to use to fit the lyrics. And it wasn't necessarily verse, chorus anymore. It would go away. The music would just follow the structure of what the lyrics are doing.
Okay.
So they were not conventional songs anymore.
Right.
And
that album was called Tilt.
Tilt, yes. And it starts off very well. I described that. Some of the songs later on become a little more. They're not conventional because they're not, but they're a little. He gives you the most challenging stuff at first, and then it kind of the other stuff I think is easier to connect with.
Okay, sort of blends back into more rock, or into with more instrumental, or just more lyrical.
It's just I'm sorry.
That's
how to put it. It's
you've been talking nonstop for 55 minutes, which is hilarious and perfect.
Oh, okay.
That is the ideal Dork Forest. Plug and play, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with Jeanne Hospod, and it's jeannehospod.com. It'll be in the notes. Okay.
It's just a little more easier for me to connect with. I don't know how to exactly explain it, but it's just I think the stuff's just harsher in the beginning, and as you get on, like the title song Tilt, it almost sounds like a country song at first. He says it's almost like a parody of a country song, and then when it does get to a chorus, and the chorus kind of tilts in a weird way, and it kind of skews your perspective, and cool. It's very it's fascinating. And try to get to the next one. So people are like, so now what next? And he tried not to take so long, although it still took about almost another decade, because he said he was dealing with, at this point, he was doing other things. He was working with other musicians. He wrote some music for Ut Limper. Can you hit me? I'm not sure if I just knocked myself out of the.
No, you're doing fine.
Okay. He wrote for the Lemper. He did a festival, Meltdown Festival, where he got different, got Blur and Pulp. And Pulp was a band he also produced. We Love Life, pop, rock pop.
Right.
Made friends. His life became very close friends with Jarvis Cocker. He contributed something to an album called Plague Songs, where different artists, including Laurie Anderson, I think Brian Eno, other musicians just covered different plagues. And he did the Plague of Darkness. So he's doing lots of little things, but he also had to deal with, he did come back to the United States briefly because I think he had I think his mother might have been ill, and he had to take care of her. I think he even said sometimes, he even mentioned one time hay fever being an issue sometimes when he wants to sing and have to call it off for a little while. And so in 2007, he does The Drift. And The Drift is harder, it's more rock. At the same time while he's recording it, Stephen Kijak is doing a documentary on him and got access, even though as private as he was granted access to the studio so he could watch what he was doing. He does a song called Clara. It's about the execution of Benito Mussolini and his girlfriend Clara. He doesn't have any sympathy towards dictators. He's starting to deal a lot with abuses of power. He talks about dangerous clowns. He had no sympathy for dictators, but he did have kind of a questioning empathy for the women who got caught up in their world.
Sure.
And so if you can listen, I always say if someone wants to listen to his later work, and just if they can spend time on just one, because there's sensory overload. I cannot listen to when I first listened to the later stuff, it was like, whoa, it's too much. You have to just take one at a time. And he even said that. He says, don't, it's not stuff you can listen to on heavy rotation. You're not supposed to get it all at once. He said, someone one time told him, I'm sorry, like, I love all your work, but I can't listen to the later stuff like in the heavy rotation like I can listen to like Scott 4 or Scott 2 or something. Because
right.
Oh no, you shouldn't. He says that would kill you.
Yeah.
And he says, it's like it's a time.
So
you
each track or each song is something just to sort of be savored, and you listen to it and take a little time.
Yes, and even if you don't think it's okay, this is too out there, give it a little time and don't worry about it. He even said that. Don't worry about it. Just let it wash over you. And, come back to it later if you want to. But right. Clara is just it's like an epic movie. It's like the European movie he wanted to make. His idea, he was talking about this idea of Europe, like his music was always more European than Europe itself, the European pop that was coming out, because it was this idea, this idea of Europe. And that's it's like a movie. Just close your eyes and listen to it. It's beautiful and touching, and that's horrifying.
On the Drift?
On the Drift. And it's also horrifying. There's this percussion. They show it in the 30th Century Man, how they get the percussion for this. Brought in a big side of beef, or side of pork, and he had his drummer punching the pork that sound like fists on flesh. Yeah. And it's
the last episode I just did recorded earlier today was about effects pedals. Oh. And it's about the how to play the music with different effects and some noise music there. So was the Drift, that was 2007?
2007.
Did he do another album before he passed?
He did 2 more. I'm sorry. I know that we're probably the time constraint. I'm trying to get to the other ones because they're so good. So he does after this, like he's going a little faster because one of the things he keeps starting to say is like, I might be dead by the next album. So I think he wants to kind of step it up. So he does Bish Bosh. Although I think I'm reversed on the image here.
No, Bish Bosh. I can see it. Bish Bosh.
That is another dark album, but it's also very kind of goofy and fun and silly, but also very dark. But he's one of the things that starts showing up is a sense of humor. But he says that Bish Bosh is like the idea of like in British, like Bish Bosh as in sorted, done, but Bosh as in Hieronymus Bosch, and Bish like the English slang, street slang for bitch, like this my bish.
Right. So, and what's Bosch? What's
Bish,
the reference?
And Bosch, for Hieronymus Bosch, the painter who did the Garden of Earthly Delights, which is this detail. And this is sort of like, it has this feeling of this epic, like how just of everything of society and how trivial and ridiculous and deadly and beautiful and it just has this epic feel to it. If you ever look in Hieronymus Bosch, like there's this thing on Twitter, the Bosch bot, and it's just this bot that takes random photos of the Garden of Earthly Delights and just shows details because it's just hilarious and beautiful and creepy and funny and horrifying, just all kinds of stuff. If you can follow that on Twitter, Bosch bot. So Bish Bosh kind of covers that world, and Bish Bosh is the idea of he thought of an epic goddess, a creative this epic artist goddess, and so get into that. There's a song called Zircon, a flagpole sitter. I wrote that to you saying it's the most banana pants thing he's ever done. I wish I could go into it, but that would be another hour. So I will. Epizootics it's kind of this. It's kind of fun. It's his version of like if you can get through Zircon, which if you get through Zircon, you can be rewarded by Epizootics, which is almost like kind of a Scott Walker dance party, like in his own weird dark way. And then he started working at a much faster pace. He followed it up 2 years later. He worked with a drone metal band called Sun, and it's called Soused. And it's and I think that kind of really was a perfect match for him, because his music was getting more stripped and getting to its like bare essentials, and this way he could really get like, he could use the band to get a big epic just noise that he needed to make. But he has started to come back around and starting to do a verse chorus in this. So in some ways he's kind of coming back a little bit. I mean, returning to something a little more, but it's both outrageous and it's more conventional, because the song structure is becoming something a little more recognizable. Then I wish I could go on about it. Herod is just a gorgeous song. I want to make a painting of it someday. Herod 2014, which is about kind of this female mother character who is hiding her children away from this deadly paternalistic force. And this character is pursuing her, but at first it's in a way, and it's deadly and it's ominous. But then the point of view changes to someone who's trying to corner someone who is very scared and wants to help them. And he talks about almost like a breech birth in livestock, and having to come in and come up inside and turn the baby around. Mm-hmm. And then as someone who is religious and in awe of this life force. So it kind of does this whole journey where it's dark, but it actually ends, I think, very beautiful and very loving. And then there's this other song called Bull that is, it's talking about how life is in so much pain, relentless pain, but also life can go on, and you can still, it's very, I think it's positive in the face of a lot of darkness. That there's a thing, Tig Notaro had said one time when she did one of her dark stand-up, that was a turning point for her, when she was talking about, she was dealing with a lot of very dark things in her life. And she said, it's just playing with the audience, like telling them horrible turns in her life, but then making a joke of it, but then going dark again. And she said to an audience member who got very upset, and she goes, it's okay. It's not okay, but it's going to be okay. And mm-hmm. I think that's what he was kind of, it's not okay, but it's going to be okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah. And then just to kind of sum it up, because he worked with this musician, Brady Corbet, who was a young child actor, who very pretty young man, who had ambitions of doing something else, and he wanted to write and direct his own movies. And he also had a dream of Europe, I believe. And he made this movie called Childhood of a Leader, and it's about the rise of fascism from World War I to World War II through this child who grows up to become a Hitler-like or Mussolini-like character. And right. And also, I think there's this parallel. It kind of shows like kind of Scott's beginnings. And then, and Scott did the soundtrack, and it's just epic. It's beautiful. And then he did worked with him on his second movie called Vox Lux, which is about it's sort of like a Damned, A Star Is Born, but it's about this child who survives a school shooting, and she's between life and death, and makes a deal with the devil to live. And he agrees, and he makes her a star to carry out his word. And the
devil is very tricky. Mm-hmm. It's always a trick. It's just like, never make a deal with the devil, you guys. You think it's all going to work out, but it turns out. Well, no, go ahead. So sorry.
No, that's okay. No, that's fine.
I've weeded off. Yeah.
So she does a deal with the devil, and she kind of loses her soul, and she carries on this idea of more immortality. And what's her name? The girl who's in Black Swan played her. Natalie Portman.
Natalie Portman.
She was worried she couldn't sing in this. Now, she did not do the songs. Sia did the songs.
Okay.
these candy coated for her songs. Scott did the soundtrack, the underlying orchestrated soundtrack, but she did these candy coated pop tunes to say that basically that seem like just earworms, but in the context of the movie, it's really kind of a dark message.
Yeah, and that's the Vox Lux movie.
That's Vox Lux, yes. And then he had also a published book called Sundog, which was an overview of his past, of all his curated collection of his lyrics. And he also had a set of lyrics he was going to make a new album for, but he had cancer and he couldn't do it. It
didn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah. But Amira McBride did the forward to it. And she wrote this beautiful romance. Well, it's a dark romance too, called The Lesser Bohemians. And she based the sexuality of the lead male character on Scott Walker's songs, and even in description, it sounds like his physical description. And I know you like romance novels. You should look at that. It's,
okay.
But it's a dark movie. But I wish I could go into more detail. But I
yeah, we're at that's the thing about the Dork Forest. It starts and it's over almost immediately as you're like, but I had like two more. Okay. It's okay. It's all right.
It's okay.
We'll have you back. Okay. This has been a delight though. And Jeanne Hospod, you guys, JeanneHospod. It'll be in the notes. Check out the art, check out the animation, check out the website. This has been fascinating. I've never even heard of the guy.
Yeah. And also, if you go to my latest, I'll so if you can put it on there. My latest blog post, I did compile all the playlists, and information with it, so you can
please do.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's already up, so you can take a look at it. Yeah,
that's so great. And Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat, my hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?